You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Termina هناك لشوارزنيجر. جول.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to another day of Soccer Today. Kevin, over the weekend, starting on Friday for the Canada game and ending last night for the Mexico Carousel game, I watched 9 games of soccer, 810 minutes of the beautiful game. Which
Oh, you did some math too.
Yeah, exactly. Hashtag math, which was starting to become a bit of the blurred game as opposed to the beautiful game by the end of it. I'm not going to lie, but a lot of football on the weekend, some of it local. I worked 2 of those games for League One Ontario, 2 very competitive games at Durham United. I enjoyed going out there as I always do, and you should really check out the local game, whether it's the PLSQ or League One Ontario or whatever league is close to you. But I watched a lot of the Gold Cup too, and that's going to be the focus of today's show. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. A lot of Gold Cup, but I still haven't recovered from Friday night. You know, a game like this against Honduras, 0-0, some chances for Canada, some chances for Honduras, some crazy save by Borjan late in the game that my heart could not handle. I'm fine. But if you go on my social media, I was actually commuting. I was in the subway with my phone watching the game, wearing my kit. And I have to say, if anybody was watching me, they could just tell what was going on without even having to watch the game, just with my facial expressions. And yeah, I'm still stressed.
Well, there you go. I was not at a subway because the Toronto subway could not possibly allow me to watch video while I was on there. But that's a complaint for our transit show, which is going to debut with me just screaming at the window soon. But nonetheless.
Yeah, thank you, STM, which is the Montreal Metro system, for being able to have reception in the metro.
Yeah. Again, the show that I will do on transit, which is me screaming at the window, will tell you that Toronto was offered that and turned it down because, hey, TTC, why would you be serving the people? But nonetheless, Canada against Honduras on the weekend, that will be the focus of the start of this. Really, as you said, a 0-0. Honduras trying to pull a Canada. They've advanced to the group stage without scoring a goal, although if you look on paper, it looks like they scored 3. And we're going to talk about that in the second segment a little bit. Of course, that forfeit to French Guiana. I thought on the whole, as you mentioned at the end of the game, I think the heat started to play a little bit of a role for the young Canadian team, and they started to maybe get opened up a little bit more than they would have liked. But by and large, if you looked at the greater whole of that game, thought it was a fair result. I thought that the overall play for the 3 games was a fair result for Canada to have its 5 points and advance as a second-place finisher to a quarterfinal where they will draw Jamaica. So, you can't be upset after the last decade.
And we're being nice when you say a decade. It could be worse. You can, yes, in 2007 they made it to the semifinal, but if you take some results out of it, it's been like this for a long time.
Yes, and they made the quarterfinals in 2009, which was the last time they qualified. I keep thinking, because I forget about that tournament, the 2009 tournament, all the time, because they qualified for the quarterfinals really poorly. Like, they were a third-place finisher, and I think they only had 1 goal maybe, and it was just not a good tournament for them. And they ended up bowing out pretty weakly in that quarterfinal to Honduras, obviously.
Why? Yeah, exactly, right? Who else?
So it was a bit forgettable, but nonetheless, it's just it's good times. 5 points, as I said. And there's an article I read today when I was preparing for the show that was written in the Dallas Morning News of all places, talking about the new era of Canadian soccer. Of course, they played down there, so that's where the impetus to that one would be. But the fact is, this is a team that I think has been one of the stories of the Gold Cup. And I don't know if we necessarily, even us most rosy-cheeked, excited about the tournament Canadians would have predicted that the Canada would be a story outside of Canada in this tournament. But yet, when you factor in Alphonso Davies, you factor in the fact that they performed, much greater than they have in the last 9 years anyway, decade,
Yeah,
almost for sure.
It's not just the results though. Like it's not just the 5 points. It's how. It's how they got to those results in those 90 minutes, those 3 times 90 minutes that Canada played in a style, in a fashion, with a different attitude that literally revitalized fans' love for the national team. It's that drastic of a change that happened in those 3 games. Zambrano, what he's able to do in 2 months, I have no idea how, and I don't know. Like I can't put myself in the future to see the sustainability and to see how it works through time to achieve a certain goal. I'm just talking about those 3 games, and I'm not even talking about the knockout stage. But those 3 games, Dwayne, I saw a team that played together. I saw a team that had no ego, personal ego, no will to one player look great. And no. It was all about the work, all about moving forward, confident on their ability on the ball, without the ball, being able to look at example Samuel Piet. His statistic, 40 out of 43 passes done. That type of statistics almost out of nowhere, but that attitude that he brings, and I think he's a good example, and Scott Arfield as well, is how this team with attitude, with work, with the way they perceive themselves has changed, and it brought them to maybe a new what's possible, like a new potential, a new playground. Like, oh, that's how you do it. It seems like a breakthrough was made a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and look, we have to be careful to not, assume that all has been solved. 30 years of
No,
frustration
right.
is.
I'm just saying that at least we're seeing progress in a direction that we can all get behind.
And I think I go back to the interview that it was not an interview on Canada, but there was a brief little snippet of Canadian topic in the interview with Siggy Schmidt on Extra Time Radio just before the Gold Cup started, where he was addressing what he felt as an outsider was Canada's biggest problem. And he identified it not as talent, but as belief. And I think that what you're getting at sort of speaks to that there's a greater belief amongst this crew. And that's sort of what that Dallas Morning News article said as well, that they can compete, that they aren't outsiders, that they aren't minnows. If you play like minnows, you are a minnow. And that was kind of the message that Schmidt gave in that interview. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here.
That's what Patrice Bernier said too yesterday, Dwayne. Literally said, look, we realized that we might be, like, it was a different word, but it's exactly that. The belief, it's there. Anything is possible now. It's like we're in the quarters. We're going to play. We're trying to represent this country, trying to prove that this roster, this group of players is talented enough to compete. Those attitudes, right? The way Zambrano talks about this team, like, we can beat Jamaica. Yes, they have some game changers here and there, but we do too. That attitude, it's refreshing.
No, precisely. And look, we'll preview the Jamaica game in more detail with a guest. Hopefully, I have to book one, but I should be able to do that on Wednesday. But nonetheless, I think that we should right now think of that as at the very least a coin flip in that game. At the very least, based on the way Jamaica played, they were lucky to get past El Salvador, a team that Canada handled in the semifinals under Floro. So I wouldn't necessarily say that by any means you should consider Canada an underdog in this game against Jamaica, and that's not something I necessarily would have thought going in. Jamaica, of course, made the final in the last Gold Cup. And if you look ahead, it's dangerous to look ahead too far, but if you look ahead into a potential semifinal matchup with Mexico, it's not like they've been burning the field up.
They had trouble scored against Curacao last night. It took like 89th minute to score a second, and Curacao almost scored like 3 times in the second half to tie it up. Like, they were all measure here, Curacao, last night.
Exactly. So, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to be bold enough to say that Canada would be a favorite in a game heading in against Mexico, but I wouldn't completely I'd give them a puncher's chance, more than a puncher's chance. They have a better chance to win than McGregor has to hit Mayweather. That's what I would say.
Oh, first Maymac reference in the history of soccer today.
There you go. I went to the press conference last week, as anyone who on my social media would know, and it was a blast. It was so fun. Anyway.
Yeah, the one in New York is the one that you probably are glad you missed. It was terrible.
Yes. He was wearing that.
Well, 2 hours late, first of all, and then wearing those god awful pants and a really, really big puffy fur coat.
Yeah, well, we were just not to talk about this too much, but I can imagine why it was late because when we were standing there, they had made announcements that it would be 5 minutes about 10 times. When we, one of the times he's saying it would be 5 more minutes, as we saw like a caravan of black vans coming in. So obviously they hadn't even shown up yet. But at any rate, we'll leave well enough alone there. Quickly before we let's get back to the Gold Cup though. Maybe we'll talk about that when it happens because pop culture, we like to get it in.
Hey, it's our Ali versus Fraser. Just this time, there's one guy has. Remember that movie, The Great White Hype? I think everybody forget about that movie. Just go back and watch that movie. It's exactly what's happening.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. I'm not a huge MMA fan or a huge boxing fan. I'll watch both when there's a big event, but certainly this one, even though I know it's a bit of a circus, I'm still watching the damn circus. When the circus is in your backyard or on your TV upstairs, as the case may be, you're going to watch the damn thing. Anyway, speaking of circuses, back to the Gold Cup. If you look at Canada's play in the first 3 games so far, just real quickly, and we're going to exclude Alphonso Davies from this conversation. I sort of wanted to ask you who you thought that your highlight performer of that is. What your performer you're most excited about having watched the 3 games. Again, excluding the young kid because we've talked to death about him already, and he's obviously very exciting. Yeah. He would probably fit this bill.
I'm tempted to say Scott Arfield, but even more, Samuel Piette, for me, this is his breakout performance. And you go back to the press conference, the comments that he made. He's like, yeah, I was happy to play with Atiba and those guys and Simon and Simeon and all those players in that generation. But now it's our time to shine. And then backing up those comments with the performance of his life. 3 games of his life, best game he ever played with the Canadian men's national team in a maybe unrewarding role where his goal is not necessarily to score goals, but it is to make everybody else better, to slow the tempo, to accelerate the tempo, to be that quote unquote dirty role in the midfield, to stop the transition of the other team, to start your own, to be that pit bull. And Samuel Piette, for me, has made a lot of brand new fans open a lot of eyes in a North American perspective. And I would not be surprised whatsoever if he is signed or transferred or bought or loaned to a North American team in a very near future.
Yeah, it's sort of been floundering in the lower levels of Spain. It's nice to have a guy in Spain, but you kind of want to play at a higher level up to this point. Piette's a guy that I think under Floro, a lot of people were consistently confused by his call-ups, to be blunt, because it was just hard to see exactly what he brought. And I don't think they had an identified role. But now that I've seen him out there for a while, I wonder whether he might be able to, if Bernier does, in fact, follow through with the retirement, and who knows what he's doing, whether he might fit in the Impact playing a similar role next year.
Yeah, well, there's a big swell right now on social media. There's a swell that people want Piette. People want Piette in Montreal. And if you go back to the Curacao-Montreal game, Curacao-Canada game in Montreal last month, it was about 350 people coming in just to see Samuel Piette from his past friends, family. The Piette section was in full noise and in full force. And I kind of hope that does be replicated with the Montreal Impact. I think it could be really worth it to have Piette like the heir apparent to Patrice Bernier.
All right. Quickly before we go to break, I'll give a shout out to maybe collectively the whole back line. Stephen Victoria in particular, I think, has surprised me because he's not a guy that I really trust a lot back there, but I thought he's played steady and okay. And the clean sheet in Honduras was a big part of some of his plays out there. And obviously the man who anchors it all in Borjan had a brilliant performance, I think, both against Costa Rica and against Honduras. And is someone that has, Crepeau, we want him to succeed, and we think he's the long-term future. But
saying Borjan is good is nothing on Crepeau, and I think there's a difference here. We're not saying Crepeau is not good enough. No, we're saying Borjan really showed us in the last 2 games and a half how good he truly is, and we don't have a chance to see his club game many times because of time zone and not available on normal TV here in Canada where he plays and all that. Sometimes it does, but it's very rarely that they perform far in the Champions League. But we don't have a chance to see him play game to game and see his reaction and how he plays. And it's nothing to take away from Crepeau's game. But Milan, wow, what a performance. You mentioned Costa Rica, but against Honduras, point blank saves that kept the clean sheet to finish the Gold Cup. We haven't seen this. I don't remember when. So no, Borjan is really even better than I have remembered.
Yeah, and he's a character and he's a fun guy out there. And if you're watching a lot of the social media stuff that's being put out by Canada Soccer, it seems like a really loose and happy group. Hopefully they can continue that through the quarterfinals, adding Kyle Lara into the mix. I kind of like that we're listening to that, watching that game last night, them talking about how they were bringing in the guns for the quarterfinals. It made me feel like Canada was a big club again, that they actually had guns to bring in. And I was, ignoring why he was coming in late. But nonetheless, it was kind of fun. Yeah, we'll leave that well enough alone for now. Exactly. Look, exciting times ahead. I think young team, it's one of the youngest teams. I think it probably is the youngest team in the Gold Cup right now. That's got to excite you if you're a Canadian fan.
Hey, and it's the main event, right? Because we're the last game played in the quarterfinals, mean that CONCACAF thinks that game is going to be the main event, right? That's why we're last.
It's been moved to second last because they flipped the games on Thursday. So it is now actually a 7:30 start rather than a
co-main event.
Start.
I'll settle for co-main event.
All right, there you go. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the French Guiana stuff and some of the things that Victor said yesterday.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. Yesterday, Victor Montagliani was on the Fox Soccer halftime show doing an interview talking about the Mulatto French Guiana situation. And he sort of, he kind of added some information to this that's back stage stuff that we hadn't really been aware of, that sort of lends a little bit of a different light on it. Now, I'm not quite willing, Kevin, to forgive French Guiana completely, because I think it's kind of callous and unfair of them to purposely forfeit a game in a competition like this, in particular when you factor in that, they're fighting for the rights of these non-FIFA nations, the French-speaking nations within CONCACAF, and they ended up, ironically screwing another one out of their rightful quarterfinal spot because of this forfeiture, that being Martinique, who would have qualified as one of the best third-place finishers otherwise, but instead it went to Honduras because they handed them points and goals. So there's a bit of an irony there that they're trying to help, French-speaking non-FIFA nations, and they screw one over, right? However,
makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Whatever. That said, the information that Victor put out there was that one of the fights that the CONCACAF is having, and they're trying to make a point over with FIFA and with the clubs in Europe, is that they can't get their players released, these non-FIFA countries, for the Gold Cup or for the Caribbean Cup, because most of them compete in the Caribbean Cup. In fact, I think all of them do. And that's a problem for them. And more to the point, and probably even more dangerous, is that right now these players are choosing to come over here either covering insurance by themselves or not being insured. And that's something that, as a professional, it's very difficult to sort of to do, because you're really risking your livelihood to play in these international tournaments.
You're risking your family's livelihood. You're risking like a lot, your future. You're risking what if you suffer a career-ending injury and you're not insured for the rest. Yeah, talk about millions of dollars here.
Yeah, exactly. You can suffer a career, and the argument people can go is, you can get hurt anytime, and that's true.
But playing in a bumpy pitch in the middle of nowhere that has rocks in them, the risk factor sometimes is higher than none.
Yeah, and I also think that if you look at your general, insurance programs that you might have just on your personal body, like get hit by a bus walking across the street, life insurance type stuff, that's not going to get covered, in certain cases if you're putting yourself at undue risk, right? So that's kind of what we're looking here. If you have insurance on your livelihood, same deal would apply. And certainly if you're yourself at club level, the club's going to have insurance on you so that your contract would be paid out and you would be getting that money. So that's not necessarily the case if it happens in international play. So we understand and we empathize with this. And I think that if you listen carefully to what we were saying last week, that we weren't necessarily not empathizing with some of the issues that the non-FIFA nations have. My solution is pretty simple in this. And it's kind of, you have to decide whether you want your cake or you want to eat it too, right? There's some advantages to being part of the French Federation, I'm sure. You're getting greater access to the French League. You're getting the opportunity for your truly exceptional players to play for the French national team or the French youth national teams, as the case may be as well. So there are some advantages to that, but there's some disadvantages, as we're just articulating. So maybe the solution is to look for full FIFA membership and try and qualify and try and go it on your own. So that's kind of the decision I think these places have to make.
And in the same vein, right now, there's kind of like a battle, kind of like a Cold War happening between the French Guiana Football Federation and the France Football Federation, where the French Football Federation is truly trying to take advantage sometimes because of its power, because of the size that they have to take advantage of the best players of a French Guiana and not release them when they actually need them. And so that battle, we saw basically maybe a chapter of that battle in this year's CONCACAF Gold Cup, where CONCACAF, yes, is going to have to sanction French Guiana in a way because of FIFA, but CONCACAF is wanting to back their nations, their members towards FIFA so that they do have a case. And now by if we were talking about legal things here, talk about the legal side of things, the way that French Guiana had to transgress the rules so that it could be sanctioned, and in regards you can pull that sanction and appeal and say why you think your team should appeal to that sanction, and that's where CONCACAF couldn't come in and support French Guiana now having actually something that has been done by that club or by the other federation, so you can appeal. Like, you need to create the precedent or to create an incident, if you want to be able to present your case afterwards.
Yeah, precisely. France, of course, has a long history of looking beyond its own shores to find players with connections using their overseas territories. Their most famous player of all.
Zidane and company.
Yeah, their most famous player of all, obviously, being coming to mind. So certainly,
he's Algerian, but that's something else.
Yeah, in Algeria, obviously, full FIFA nation, but just there's a lot of. France had a big, just like England, just like Portugal, just like Spain, they had a lot of territory at one point, and they still take advantage of that in some ways. And, I can't blame them for that completely, but at the same time, the smaller nations have to stand up for themselves, there's a term for it, their territories, their non-something territories, doesn't matter, regardless.
Préfecture,
we know what we're talking.
In French, they're préfecture territoriale, I believe.
Yes, there you go. So there you go. Protected territories kind of is what that means, right?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, sort of, yes. That's my French summed up.
Basically, it's a nice way to say we conquered this place. It used to be a colony, and now we don't know where it stands, really.
Yeah, we're still we send a governor over there.
We're still trying to figure it out.
Our citizens go on vacation because the beaches are there.
And we want to have a place in the Caribbean where we can go and enjoy the sun, where to speak the same language as we do, and kind of has the same culture, kind of, maybe not, maybe yes. So yeah, let's keep it under the same flag.
Yeah, that whole flirtation with Canada and Turks and Caicos keeps coming up every so often, and all the Canadians always go, damn yeah, make that happen.
Yes.
We want to have something down there.
Yeah. Wait, can you imagine not having to trying to figure out what's the exchange rate before you go down to south? Like, okay, I don't have to lose half of the value of my money to go down south. Great.
How long would it be before Canada were to take over? For those that don't know, there's been long this rumor that Canada is going to adopt Turks and Caicos as sort of a protected territory, like Puerto Rico would be to the States, say. And this is something that Canadians get excited about because we, of course, don't really have a South Coast. The South Coast, I live in it. It's not that south in February.
You can't really go take a dip in Lake Ontario. Well, you can, but it's at your own risk.
Yes, exactly. So how long would it be before Turks and Caicos became part of Canada, before there would be a National Hockey League expansion team placed there?
or how long for the Canadian Soccer Association to naturalize a few Turks and Caicos superstars?
Yeah, well, I don't know if such a thing exists, but they
might.
There
could be one. You're gonna find one. Come on, if you start looking, you're bound to find at least one.
Yeah, I might be going down there to work. So at any rate, there you go.
League One Ontario expansion in Turks and Caicos. Turks and Caicos United.
All right, moving off this silliness. It is Monday. We have to keep things light. Let's look at the quarterfinals real briefly. First off, I have on the lineup, is the USA the favorite now? And I'm basing that on the fact that they're bringing 6 guys in with a lot of experience, including the 2 Toronto guys. That they, if you look at Mexico's play, the fact that they brought the B line up in there, they haven't really got themselves really going outside of maybe that first game. I still have trouble saying Mexico's not the favorite in any tournament in CONCACAF ever, but based on their play so far.
Mexico did a lot of squad rotation though. Every
Yeah.
single player in the Mexican roster played, and every player that hasn't played was starting the match last night. So, in Juan Carlos Osorio's mind, he had because of the Confederations Cup before, and he rewarded some players there and some players here that didn't have a chance to play at the Confederations Cup. But he's making sure that there's a squad rotation so every player has a taste of a group stage. Now it will be maybe a little different heading into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, he'll probably stick with the lineup. Now, Mexico has said, and this is consistent with their past behavior in this, that they're not going to take advantage of that ability to transfer 6 players in, which is really supposed to be for injuries, the way the U.S. is doing. And there is a legitimate debate, and they were even having it in American circles, to their credit yesterday, about whether this, like Alexi Lalas, for instance, thinks it's a joke that they can just bring 6 guys in. And I tend to agree with them. Like, if you're just going to do it for like to bolster your side, then that's one thing. If you have like I'd rather have it like a 3-man taxi squad, like we see with the women's at the Olympics, where they have those 3 girls that were on women, I should say, that were on the Olympic roster that could come in if there was an injury. And I don't mind having that, but just being able to kind of just parachute 6 guys in does seem like it makes the tournament look a little less serious than it should, is what I would say. So the U.S. do, they have every right to do it though. So we'll leave it at that. It does set up, as it always does with the U.S.-Mexico final. They purposely set the draw up in such a way to try and create a U.S.-Mexico final every year, because it's going to maximize their profits, which is ultimately what the Gold Cup is about. And I say that both cynically and non-cynically, because they do use the Gold Cup profits to fund a lot of programs in the poorer parts of the region.
To fund the rest of the CONCACAF's calendar, basically, on the women's side, on the men's side, everything is basically helped with the Gold Cup. So we do understand the cynicism of this tournament existed to this format for money-making purposes, but we do understand as well the benefits for the game itself in the region that this tournament creates.
Yeah, I've heard someone say, if you like women's under 17 tournaments in CONCACAF, then you're going to have to deal with what they do with the Gold Cup, because they might not be able to do them otherwise.
And men's under 17 and any level basically that CONCACAF has, it's all trickles down from the Gold Cup.
Yeah, but that said, from a sporting perspective, from a pure sporting perspective, those of us who are used to watching, UEFA, we tend to get frustrated by this and want to have a Gold Cup which truly moves around the region and is a little more, open draw, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe one day Duane will get there too. Right? Maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll start by being Canada and Mexico full time, like a full tournament, I mean. Or maybe you do have a traveling group stage, which is already the case in the United States. You don't have a lot of miles by just crossing one or the other borders. So we've seen this 2 years ago. So that could be another venture in the future. And maybe Mexico hosts it full rights one year. And maybe some down the road, other nations are ready to do so too. I think CONCACAF, or at least when it's organized a few years before each Gold Cup, do not think of itself ready to go fully into maybe another of the top 3 countries. And if you're not ready to go in another than the top 3 countries, do you really need to go out of where you are right now? And that's probably the thinking behind.
Yeah, I'd like to see it get to 16 teams. I would like to see there be some kind of women's event that's every other year as well. I realize that the depth of field in the women's side of the game makes that challenging. It's why I floated out on Twitter yesterday whether it might make sense to work with Knobold for that, to do a tournament in the Americas with the women's team, which would be, I think, a really interesting experiment. But it costs money to do all of that stuff. So you need to make money somewhere, and here we are. Let's look at quickly the quarterfinal matchups and sort of what jumps out at you. Which one are you most excited to watch beyond the Canada-Jamaica game, obviously, which is going to be our primary focus up here?
Mexico-Honduras, because I'm hoping Mexico puts on a beating to Honduras. So it's always satisfying to watch. Outside of that one, of course, you have the United States game that could be interesting. Yes, the United States will be the heavy favorite, but even if I'm not going to say Canada, Jamaica, still the game that I think even for neutrals could be very interesting. I think the level of Canada and Jamaica right now are pretty close. And I think it's going to be a blow for blow type of game. And I think it's going to be like a 3-2 or something similar to that. And I do think it's going to be the closest game in the quarterfinals.
Look, El Salvador has actually played pretty well in this tournament and have been impressive. They've been also a good story. They've been scoring a lot of goals. They've been playing pretty freely. So I do think they'll give the U.S. a bit of a run. I think obviously Costa Rica Panama is a competitive matchup as well.
Well, no, you're right. That one's going to be same as Canada Jamaica, just a little higher level.
Yeah, there's two Hacks teams there, but the Canada-Jamaica game, and they were saying this on the Fox panel last night, might be the most intriguing one of the four, simply because you have two teams that underachieved in World Cup qualifying that seem to be playing a little bit better, although I think Canada might be the more impressive of the two, and I say that with bias, obviously, but I think I can take enough of the step away and say that objectively as well. So that it is an intriguing game, and I do think that it's a bit of a coin flip. Quickly, who are your semifinalists? Predict them.
Canada, Mexico, United States, and Costa Rica.
So you're kind of going chalk minus Canada in there.
Well, no, I am going chalk.
Yeah, well, chalk based on the play in the round. So heading into the tournament, I think you put Jamaica over Canada. And look, I'm reluctant to completely go all poser here, but I do think based on the play so far, Canada has been more impressive than Jamaica, so it's reasonable to predict them through.
If Canada plays the way they play against Costa Rica, Duane, against Jamaica, they're going to score more than one. And they might concede one or two, but they're going to put a few past Andre Blake. It's not going to be easy. Andre Blake is having an amazing tournament too for Jamaica. But I do feel that Canada, with the fact that they know more Jamaica than maybe, like they know the U.S., of course, but Jamaica is the team that they know more in the region as well because of playing with some of the players in club. And I do feel it's going to be a mental advantage for Canada to be like, you know what? We know those guys. We know those guys. We know ourselves. And we think we're better than those guys. Let's just show it. And I truly think that belief will continue to grow. And once you beat a Jamaica, then on to Mexico. And it's another story. But for me, when you're looking at the roster of Jamaica, and if you're Canada, almost position by position, like, well, we can compete.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jamaica's got some of the, people might say that don't really look at the other rosters closely. Say, well, Canada's got USL players on there. Well, so's Jamaica.
Their best player, arguably, this tournament is from the USL.
So there you go. All right. I'm pretty much in agreement with you on the semifinalists. I will give Panama a chance, though. That's the one thing I'll say there. And it's obviously two Hacks matchups. It wouldn't be that big of an upset if Panama were to get past Costa Rica, who has maybe struggled a little bit beyond what their expectations were heading into this.
Well, they don't have their 18 there either. That's the thing that we forget. It's like, look, there's a lot of players that usually feature in the starting 11 of Costa Rica that are not there right now.
Exactly. All right. Before we wrap the show up, if you tuned in and are thinking to us or yourselves that, the day after they named a female doctor, which I am perfectly okay with, by the way, any Doctor Who fans out there that disagree with that, get your head out of your ass. It was time. Regardless.
It was time 20 years ago, but yes.
Yeah. If you're going to, and it's a time traveling alien. It doesn't have gender. Jesus, it regenerates. Come on, people. Regardless, what I'm saying is you're going, why aren't you talking about the women's Euros, you male pigs? Well, fair. However, I'm giving you a whole new show on that just for this week. It's on a new show. I'm going to put it on 5 Rings. So you're going to get 3 times weekly, 20-minute shows talking about the women's Euros. I watched it yesterday. I enjoyed it greatly. It was a greatly entertaining part of my football weekend. Of the 9 games that I watched, 2 of them were on the women's Euros. I will watch every game in this tournament that I can. I might miss 1 or 2 if I have to, but by and large, you will be getting some pretty exhaustive coverage on it, which will come out on the 5 Rings feed. I'm not sure, because we have to work around Kevin's ability to technically get it up onto the line. He does most of the technical uploading and stuff like that, whereas I'll be doing the production part of it. So, I'm not sure exactly when they'll go up, but they'll be up, and you can listen to those and get some exclusive and exhaustive coverage of that tournament starting today with a bit of a preview and look back on the weekend. I have a guest on there scheduled for today who is the managing editor of The Equalizer. Allison's her name. I forget her last name off the top of my head, but nonetheless, you'll be able to listen to Allison, and I'll even know her last name by the time I have her on the show in a few hours. All right. On that note, and the Netherlands were wonderful to watch yesterday. If you're going to tune in, like I said, it was beautiful football. The level, the technical skill is so much greater than it was even 10 years ago. Anyone who's still a holdout on this, like women's football, I won't watch it stuff. Well, what did I say about Doctor Who a minute ago? I'm going to repeat that now.
And even the king and the queen of Holland were impressed enough to actually go in the locker room after the victory to celebrate with the players. So I thought that was a nice touch too.
And the former manager of Manchester United there, he was there as well. He looked at a sour look in his face like he always does. But at any rate, Louis. All right, Kevin, I'm going to say goodbye. You wrap it up.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can find every on-demand version of the shows we do here at sportspodcastingnetwork.com and on Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, iTunes, Google Play Store under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Until tomorrow, as always, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer.